សួស្តីបងប្អូនថ្ងៃនេះយើងសិក្សាពីមេរៀនបន្តតាក់ទងនឹងផែនដីថ្នាក់ទី9នៅក្នុងជំពូកទី2គឺចលនាក្នុងផែនដីនៅក្នុងមេរៀនទី1គឺទ្រឹស្ដីផ្លាកតិកតូនិកអញ្ចឹងមុននឹងដឹងថាស្អីគេទ្រឹស្ដីផ្លាកតិកតូនិកស្អីគេផ្លាកតិកតូនិកយើងទៅមើលវីដេអូទាំងអស់គ្នាតាក់ទងទៅនឹងខ្លឹមសារនៃមេរៀននេះណា
The continents haven't always looked the way they are. Hopefully this isn't a new fact for you. Over its vast lifespan, Earth has mashed its land masses together. In fact, over 300 million years ago, all the Earth's continents were connected into one large supercontinent called Pangaea, surrounded by one superocean called Panthalassa. For over 100 million years, the Earth had only one continent and one ocean, until breaking up and eventually forming the continents we see today. Boo! What if in an alternate timeline, Pangaea still existed? The continent simply never broke apart, and if humans arose to spread across the world, how would civilization be affected? Before answering these questions, we need to discuss a few facts. This is all theoretical. If Pangaea was still around, it's best to assume humans wouldn't be. Evolution is a cause and effect process, affected by the environment and geography. The simplest change in climate can affect the lineage of a species, forcing them to adapt or to go extinct. Without an Africa factor for apes to be able to rise, Homo sapiens ancestors would have gone down a much different alternate path. This said, we can still place humans on Pangaea for the sake of the theory. Plus, it would be boring without us. Humans are resourceful, and would be able to spread and conquer this Pangaea world. But geographically, what would this planet look like? Pangaea specifics are a mystery to us. We can only get a basic look of what its shape was, and hypothesize from there. Unlike today, where most land is in the northern hemisphere, most land on Pangaea was south of the equator. Long mountain ranges arose in the center of Pangaea from connecting continents, similar to India pushing up against Asia, creating the Himalayas. Because of these mountains, arid desert landscapes formed due to the lack of rainfall. It's been theorized mega monsoons swept from the ocean and brought rain to the equatorial regions. This would replenish the vast rainforests which span the equator, which is present-day North America and Western Europe. Fun fact, a lot of that coal used to bring Britain into the industrial age and mined in West Virginia was from the lush tropical forest millions of years ago. Yay, science. Back on track, human civilization would be drawn to the coastline, just as in our timeline. No surprise. Tribes and nomadic people would roam the less hospitable lands. Even if all of humanity shared the same continent, this does not mean they would be more connected. If large deserts or rainforests did form in the center of Pangaea, they would just be as limiting to communication between people as any ocean would be. We see this in Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa is connected to Asia, just as it is with Europe. Yet there was much less communication. Very little trade occurred, not counting East Africa and Madagascar. Parts of sub-Saharan Africa were almost the equivalent of the Americas in its isolation, which is why tribes like the Zulu still use spears up against British machine guns. This was because of the natural barriers of the Saharan Desert and the Congo jungle. Both regions were very difficult to cross before the Industrial Revolution and create a rift in communication between civilizations of East Asia and Europe with sub-Saharan Africa. The point is, we could still see the same effect in Pangaea. Deserts could split east and west, while equator rainforests could split north and south. Present-day North America and Eurasian peoples could develop a culture independent of South American, African, and Australian people. This is all theoretical though. There is no 100% accurate way to predict how things would have been. This was just my 2 cents on the matter. Pangaea itself is much of a mystery, but it's always fun to explore the possibilities in geography. What do you think the world would be like if Pangaea still existed? Say it in the comments. Like us on Facebook and subscribe if you have not done so. This is Cody from the Alternate History Hub.
Chà, ក្រោយពីយើងទស្សនាវីដេអូតាក់ទងទៅនឹងខ្លឹមសារមេរៀននេះគឺជាចំណុចចាប់ផ្ដើមដំបូងណាអញ្ចឹងយើងឃើញពាក្យផ្លែផ្លែកាលពី300លានឆ្នាំមុនមែនទេអញ្ចឹងគេថា300លានឆ្នាំមុនគឺមាន ទាំងដីដែលធំមួយដែលគេហៅថាប៉ង់សៀហើយបន្ទាប់មកនៅក្នុងហ្នឹងគឺអត់ទាន់មានជីវិតអីរស់នៅទេគ្រាន់តែជាសន្តានដីដែលទៅមានការពើងនៅភ្នំកើតមានឡើងហើយនឹងមានវាលខ្សាច់ហើយនឹងផ្ទៃទឹកច្រើនអញ្ចឹងអត់ទាន់មានជីវិតដូចបច្ចុប្បន្នទេតបច្ចុប្បន្ននេះបានសន្តានដីហ្នឹងទ្រស័ព្ទចេញពីគ្នាមកបង្កើតបានទៅជាទ្វីបទាំង7ហើយបានមានជីវិតចាប់ផ្ដើមមានជីវិតរស់នៅអញ្ចឹងអ្នកគ្រូអត់ទាន់លំអិតទៅក្នុងខ្លឹមសារមេរៀនយើងខ្លាំងទេយើងទៅទស្សនាវីដេអូចំនួន2ទៀតអញ្ចឹងនេះជាវីដេអូទី2ហើយបញ្ចប់នៅវីដេអូទាំង2ហ្នឹងអូនត្រូវសង្កេតហើយថានៅក្នុងចំណុចនៃវីដេអូហ្នឹងគេចង់បង្ហាញអំពីអីណាវីដេអូនេះគឺគេបង្ហាញពីការរស់នៅវិលថយក្រោយរហូតដល់250លានឆ្នាំ មានផ្ទាំងដីតែមួយឯងដែលផ្ទាំងដីធំតែមួយណាគេហៅថាអីមិញដែលយើងមើលវីដេអូដំបូងណាអញ្ចឹងយើងទៅទស្សនាវីដេអូទី3
Don't you just love it when you're right? Of course you do. And so do scientists, though the scientific method makes us have to pretend like we aren't. Fact is, the whole of scientific history is filled with people who were totally right and everybody thought they were wrong. And today I want to tell you about one of those people. He changed the way that we look at the Earth. Alfred Wegener was born in 1880 in Germany. He was one of those rare people that's just good at and interested in a lot of different things. He got his degree in astronomy, but went into the relatively young field of meteorology, where he pioneered the use of balloons to track air currents and went on expeditions to Greenland to study polar weather, at which he was totally badass. He spent winters in a hut drilling ice cores, and he also made the longest crossing of Greenland's ice cap on foot, for the win. But he was also interested in other stuff, including geophysics, which is why he got totally obsessed with this. He couldn't help but notice, like some school children will, that Africa and South America almost look like puzzle pieces. Sure, they're thousands of miles apart, but they really look like they fit together. Of course, other people picked up on this. Like I said, you probably did around 4th grade. But another one of Wegener's great qualities is that he wasn't afraid to ask the stupid-sounding questions. So he just started asking people, continents moving, is that a thing? And if it was a thing, how would we know that it was a thing? And because he was a voraciously curious guy, he was looking for the answers to those questions in all kinds of places, and guess what? He found out that fossils of the same plant species had been found on both sides of the Atlantic. He discovered that the geology of the Appalachians was almost identical to that of the Scottish Highlands, and he learned that distinctive rock strata found in South Africa were the same as in parts of Brazil. Almost as if the continents, I don't know, drifted. Finally, in 1914, while laid up in a military hospital bed during World War I, he pieced together his theory that all of the land masses on Earth used to be part of a single continent called the Ur-continent, or the origin of all continents. And over time, the masses moved, scattering fossils and rock patterns around the world. The next year, he published his research in a book, The Origin of Continents and Oceans. And the scientific community responded. They totally freaked out on him. Geologists dismissed him as a glorified weatherman. They held entire conferences devoted to debunking his book. Even his father-in-law, who was the most prestigious meteorologist in Germany, told him he should have probably stuck to the balloon thing. The conventional wisdom at the time was that continents used to be connected by land bridges that later collapsed or were covered by the oceans, and that's how they explained stuff like matching plant fossils. Of course, Wegener didn't do himself any favors by being actually pretty wrong about a lot of stuff. Like, he could not explain, he had no idea how the continents actually drifted. He thought they were just plowing through the Earth's crust like an icebreaker. He also suggested that the centrifugal force of the Earth's rotation was causing the continents to drift, which is just totally kind of crazy. Yeah, so the damage had been done, and everybody in Germany thought he was a total crazy person. No one would hire him to teach anywhere. The only job he could get was as a meteorology professor in Austria. And that is where he was in 1930, where he decided he wanted to go back to Greenland to set up some weather stations. And during a weeks-long excursion to bring supplies to one of these remote stations, Alfred Wegener disappeared in a blizzard. His body was found the following spring, and it is still there today, buried in the ice. I know, right? Because he was right. I mean, not about everything, but about a lot of stuff. And at the time of his death, people were just starting to understand what the floor of the ocean actually looked like. And decades later, that research showed that there were giant rifts and mountain ranges under the oceans. And those were the boundaries where continental plates were pulling away from each other or crashing against each other. It wasn't until the 1960s that plate tectonics became something widely accepted by the scientific community. Though he wasn't vindicated during his lifetime, he is now respected as one of the greatest scientists of his era, and you can pay your respects to him through one of the many things in science that are now named after him, including the Alfred Wegener Institute for Polar and Marine Research, or the Wegener Peninsula of Greenland, where he died, or craters on both the Moon and Mars. So, thanks here, Dr. Wegener. All of these fascinating things and more, we bring to you from SciShow, where you can subscribe at youtube.com/SciShow. You can also give us suggestions for things we should talk about or ask us questions either on Facebook or Twitter or down in the YouTube comments below.
ចាអរគុណក្រោយពីទស្សនាតាមដានវីដេអូចំនួន3ណាទាំងអញ្ចឹងក្នុងវីដេអូទាំង3ហ្នឹងគឺគេសំដៅតែលើចំណុចតែមួយគត់គឺទ្រឹស្ដីទ្វីបរស័ក្តិដែលមិញគឺវីដេអូចុងក្រោយគេមានអ្នកធ្វើបទបង្ហាញហ្នឹងមិនមែនម្នាក់ប្រុសហ្នឹងជាអ្នកវិទ្យាសាស្ត្រទេណាគឺគាត់បង្ហាញរូបបរិសម្នាក់ដែលមានពណ៌ស្រខ្មៅហ្នឹងគឺជាអ្នកវិទ្យាសាស្ត្រម្នាក់ឈ្មោះលោក Albert Wegener ដែលគាត់ជាជនជាតិអាល្លឺម៉ង់ហើយគាត់ជាអ្នកស្រាវជ្រាវរកឃើញនៅទ្វីបរស័ក្តិហើយគាត់បង្កើតទ្រឹស្ដីទ្វីបរស័ក្តិដោយគាត់លើកផុសតាងជាច្រើនដែលបញ្ជាក់នៅក្នុងហ្នឹងនៅក្នុងវីដេអូរបស់យើងហើយនឹងបន្ថែមនៅក្នុងខ្លឹមសារខាងក្រោមរបស់យើងណាអញ្ចឹងយើងមើលវីដេអូហើយយើងនឹងធ្វើការឆ្លើយជាមួយខ្លឹមសារខាងក្រោមនៅសំណួររបស់អ្នកគ្រូបានអញ្ចឹងនៅក្នុងហ្នឹងយើងដឹងហើយក៏យើងធ្លាប់រៀនពីមុនមកដូចម្ដេចដែលហៅថាទ្វីបដូចម្ដេចដែលហៅថាប៉ង់សៀអញ្ចឹងទ្វីបហើយនឹងប៉ង់សៀគឺខុសគ្នាអត់ដូចគ្នាទេគ្រាន់តែវាជាផ្ទាំងដីដែលផុសចេញពីនីវ៉ូទឹកសមុទ្រផុសចេញខ្ពស់ជាងនីវ៉ូទឹកសមុទ្រប៉ុន្តែទ្វីបគឺជាផ្ទាំងដីផុសដែលមានរយៈកម្ពស់ខ្ពស់ជាងនីវ៉ូទឹកសមុទ្រផ្ទាំងដីធំណាបើផ្ទាំងដីនឹងអត់ធំទេផុសចេញពីនីវ៉ូទឹកសមុទ្រគេអត់ហៅថាទ្វីបទេគេហៅថាកោះប៉ុន្តែប៉ង់សៀគឺជាផ្ទាំងដីដែលធំតែមួយគត់ដែលនៅក្នុងកំឡុងឆ្នាំ250លានឆ្នាំទៅ300លានឆ្នាំមុនគឺកើតឡើងពីទ្វីបទាំងអស់រួមបញ្ចូលគ្នាអញ្ចឹងមិញអ្នកគ្រូបានបញ្ជាក់ឲ្យថាអ្នកណាជាអ្នកបង្កើតទ្រឹស្ដីទ្វីបរស័ក្តិអញ្ចឹងអ្នកដែលបង្កើតទ្រឹស្ដីទ្វីបរស័ក្តិគឺលោក Albert Wegener ដែលជាជនជាតិអាល្លឺម៉ង់ហើយគាត់បានស្លាប់បាត់ហើយអញ្ចឹងដោយសារពីមុនមកនៅពេលដែលគាត់នៅរស់គឺលោក Albert Wegener ហ្នឹងអត់មានបានទទួលការ លើកទឹកចិត្តឬក៏ការស្រាវជ្រាវរបស់គាត់មានការគ្រប់គ្រងទេគេនាំគ្នាសើចចំអកគាត់លុះត្រាតែគាត់បានបោះពុំសភៅនៅទ្រឹស្ដីទ្វីបរស័ព្ទដែលបញ្ជាក់នៅផុសតាងជាច្រើននៅក្នុងទ្រឹស្ដីទ្វីបរស័ព្ទរបស់គាត់បានមានការគ្រប់គ្រងណាអញ្ចឹងនៅក្នុងឆ្នាំណាដែលអ្នកវិទ្យាសាស្ត្រសន្និដ្ឋានថាទ្វីបនៅទីតាំងតែមួយអញ្ចឹងនៅឆ្នាំដែលបញ្ជាក់ថាទ្វីបនៅក្នុងទីតាំងតែមួយដែលយើងហៅថាប៉ង់សៀនៅទសវត្សរ៍ឆ្នាំ1970និងទសវត្សរ៍ឆ្នាំ1700និងទសវត្សរ៍ឆ្នាំ1900ហេតុអ្វីបានជាលោក Albert Wegener បង្កើតទ្រឹស្ដីទ្វីបរស័ព្ទលោក Albert Wegener គាត់គឺជាអ្នកវិទ្យាសាស្ត្រខាងធរណីវិតុហើយក៏ជាគ្រូបង្រៀនណាជាគ្រូបង្រៀនអញ្ចឹងគាត់បង្កើតសមត្ថកម្មថាទ្វីបធ្វើចលនាដោយបញ្ជាក់ផុសតាំងប្រហែល3លានឆ្នាំមុនថាទ្វីបគឺជាប៉ង់សៀដែលលើកផុសតាំងគឺមានលមូនដែលអត់អាចឆាវឆ្លងទឹកសមុទ្រអត់អាចហោះពីទ្វីបមួយទៅទ្វីបមួយក្របរុក្ខជាតិដែលមានទំហំធំអត់ដែលក្នុងទឹកហើយក៏អត់ហើរតាមខ្យល់ហើយនិងសត្វល្អិតមានស្លាបដែលអត់អាចហោះហើរទៅណាប៉ុន្តែគេឃើញពពួក3ប្រភេទហ្នឹងនៅទ្វីបផ្សេងគ្នាដែលខណ្ឌចែកដោយសមុទ្រនិងមហាសមុទ្រគេក៏លោក Albert Wegener ក៏សន្និដ្ឋានថាពីមុនមកគឺនៅក្នុងផ្ទាំងដីតែមួយហើយបន្តមកខណ្ឌចែកគ្នាដោយសមុទ្រវានឹងធ្វើការបន្តពូជនៅទីតាំងផ្សេងគ្នាទី2គឺលក្ខណៈដីផូស៊ីលគឺមើលទៅលើសន្តានដីពីមុនមកគឺមានលក្ខណៈប្រហាក់ប្រហែលនិងទី3បំរែបំរួលអាកាសធាតុហើយនៅក្នុងវីដេអូនឹងដែរគឺគេបញ្ជាក់ទៅលើភាពបន្ស៊ីគ្នារវាងទ្វីបមានទ្វីបអាហ្វ្រិកនិងទ្វីបអាស៊ីដែលមានភាពបន្ស៊ីគ្នានិងមានផុសតាងជាច្រើនទៀតលម្អិតនៅក្នុងសៀវភៅទ្វីបរស័ព្ទរបស់លោក Albert Wegener អញ្ចឹងទៅបញ្ជាក់នៅទ្រឹស្ដីមួយទៀតដោយសារទ្រឹស្ដីទ្វីបរស័ព្ទត្រូវបានលោក Albert Wegener បង្កើតហើយបន្ទាប់មកទើបមានការគ្រប់គ្រងពីក្រោយហើយបន្ទាប់មកទៀតចាប់ផ្ដើមមានជនជាតិអាមេរិកម្នាក់គាត់ទៅស្រាវជ្រាវបន្ថែមថាតើទ្វីបពិតជារស័ព្ទមែនអត់អញ្ចឹងគាត់ទៅសិក្សាទ្រនុងកណ្ដាលមហាសមុទ្រអញ្ចឹងដូចម្ដេចដែលហៅថាទ្រនុងកណ្ដាលមហាសមុទ្រទ្រនុងកណ្ដាលមហាសមុទ្រគឺជាប្រព័ន្ធខ្សែទ្រនុងកំពូលបាតសមុទ្រដែលមានភ្នំភ្លើងអញ្ចឹងអ្នកណាជាអ្នកបង្កើតទ្រឹស្ដីហ្នឹងគឺទ្រឹស្ដីគម្លាតបាតសមុទ្រហ្នឹងគឺលោក Harry Hess ដែលជាជនជាតិអាមេរិកហើយគាត់ទៅសិក្សានៅទ្រនុងកណ្ដាលមហាសមុទ្រហ្នឹងហើយក៏គាត់អត់ទៅបញ្ចូលទៅក្នុងទ្រឹស្ដីទ្វីបរស័ព្ទទេគាត់បង្កើតទ្រឹស្ដីមួយទៀតគឺទ្រឹស្ដីគម្លាតបាតមហាសមុទ្រដែលគ្រប់គ្រងនៅទ្រឹស្ដីរបស់លោក Albert Wegener គឺទ្រឹស្ដីទ្វីបរស័ព្ទអញ្ចឹងនៅពេលដែលទ្រឹស្ដីពីរបញ្ចូលគ្នាគឺនឹងបង្កើតទៅទ្រឹស្ដីមួយដែលនៅក្នុងចំណងជើងមេរៀនរបស់យើងគឺទ្រឹស្ដីផ្លាកតិចតូនិកអញ្ចឹងការសិក្សាទៅលើទ្រនុងកណ្ដាលមហាសមុទ្រឬក៏គម្លាតបាតសមុទ្រចាប់ផ្ដើមលើអ្វីហើយមានដំណើរការដូចម្ដេចអញ្ចឹងគម្លាតបាតសមុទ្រហ្នឹងចាប់ផ្ដើមពីមហាសមុទ្រដែលមានស្នាមប្រេះនៅបាតសមុទ្រហើយហូរនៃសារធាតុរាវដែលយើងហៅថាម៉ាក់ម៉ាពីជម្រៅ3ទៅ4គីឡូហើយច្រានមកលើហើយចាក់កូរគ្នាតាមបណ្ដោយបាតមហាសមុទ្រហ្នឹងអញ្ចឹងហើយទើបធ្វើឲ្យមានការច្រានបន្តិចម្ដងធ្វើឲ្យគែមនៃស្នាមប្រេះតាមទ្រនុងកណ្ដាលឬក៏តាមស្នាមប្រេះនៃសម្បកផែនដីទីតាំងចាស់ខិតចេញពីគ្នាបន្តិចម្ដងដែលធ្វើឲ្យទ្វីបរស័ព្ទចេញពីគ្នាអញ្ចឹងនៅក្នុងវីដេអូបន្តនេះគឺជាវីដេអូដែលបញ្ជាក់ពីទ្រឹស្ដីផ្លាកតិចតូនិកដែលមានការគម្លាតចេញពីគ្នានៃលំហូរ ម៉ាក់ម៉ាពី3ទៅ4គីឡូម៉ែត្រក្នុងជម្រៅ3ទៅ4គីឡូម៉ែត្រហូរនៃម៉ាក់ម៉ាទៅចាក់គោលើសិលាចាស់ចាស់ប៉ុន្តែមុននឹងចូលទៅដល់វីដេអូនៅក្នុងចំណុចថ្មីយើងសម្រាប់នៅក្នុងម៉ោងមេរៀនយើងតែប៉ុណ្ណឹងដែលយើងសិក្សាទៅលើតែទ្រឹស្ដី2គឺទ្រឹស្ដីទ្វីបប្រសាទនិងទ្រឹស្ដីគម្លាតបាតមហាសមុទ្រយើងនឹងជួបគ្នានៅក្នុងម៉ោងក្រោយហើយអ្នកគ្រូសង្ឃឹមថាអ្នកទាំងអស់គ្នានឹងចូលរួមបានទាំងអស់គ្នាហើយស្រាវជ្រាវជាមួយអ្នកគ្រូទាំងអស់គ្នាជូនពរសុខភាពល្អសំណាងល្អទាំងអស់គ្នាណា